Hello, friends. It is time for another tale, a tale of the neckbeardery. This is actually from Tales of Neckbeards, the subreddit. Not just like a person called that, because there's not a person called... There might be a user called that. I don't know. I never looked it up. But either way, this is from r/Tales of Neckbeards. This is from Reddit user, and I can't stress this enough, this might be my favorite Reddit username ever, so if you hear this, I just want you to remember that point more than anything. This is from Reddit user SquibblyD, which is just so much fun to say. I'm not even, like, seriously, take 10 seconds right now. I'm not going to wait 10 seconds, obviously, but seriously say it. It's SquibblyD. SquibblyD is a fun thing to say. I've said your name about 4 times now, but one more. SquibblyD. Anyway, this is the story of Warbeard teaching D&D. Oh boy. So, let us begin, shall we? Hello, friends. Hello. I watch a lot of Red X's Neckbeard stories on YouTube, but you don't watch any of mine, for shame. And I was inspired. This is my first time submitting a story, so be gentle. I'm kidding, by the way. You don't have to watch my videos. I had the luxury of growing up with a neckbeard. Oh, fun! Let me tell you about my father. Oh, that just makes it even worse. Let's call him Warbeard. Warbeard was my dad. He was far from a conventionally appearing neckbeard by all measures. He was stocky, muscle-bound, had a big enough presence by weight of his personality that he could silence a room with a glare. What was his most fascinating and beardiest aspect was his obsession. A short stint in the actual armed forces ended in dishonorable discharge, and it lived in his head rent-free ever since. He simply could not let it go. He was obsessed, and I mean obsessed, with all things war-related. Every day it was World of Tanks or Call of Duty or anything which would let him LARP as a soldier. He even lived for it. He particularly had a thing for tabletop gaming, like Warhammer or TTRPGs that let you roleplay as soldiers. You know, I've been playing tabletop games ever since I was younger, and this just tells you how your mind goes. This is like a total aside. You wrote out TTRPG, and it took me a good 4 seconds to remember that meant tabletop role-playing games. I'm fine, I promise. My brain's not melting. If there was even a remotely militant vein to the subject matter, you could count on Warbeard to be into it. I must have watched Saving Private Ryan about 20 times growing up in the house. It would have been obnoxious if it wasn't so sad. It smacked of a man whose passion had been cut short, and he simply could not let go and recognize that this part of his life was over. No, he was forever and always stuck in the military. He would even go so far as to insist that his kids refer to him as the rank he was when he was discharged. God forbid you ever forget that he was a sergeant. Oh, he's one of those people. Yeah. No, I've known people who are actually in the armed forces and cannot stand guys who do that. And it's like, it's one thing if you're actually on duty, but when you're off duty and they're like, you still have to refer to me by rank, it's like, bruh, take it down a notch. Calm down, okay? Just calm the fuck down. What made his gaming unbearable was that Warbeard could simply not handle losing. Oh, here we go. He was obsessed with competition. He had to win every game that he played. There was no other way which a game could be played. Sounds like people I knew. If he ever lost at anything, the accusations always came out. The other side must have been cheating, or it was the fault of his teammates that he lost, or the game was rigged. There was never any way that he would honestly lose, and he would always be quick to remind people that they only beat him because they got lucky or played unfair. You can imagine, then, that he was quite popular around the gaming table. This competitive bent did not end at the gaming table either. Somehow, some way, it bled into every single aspect of his life. Whether it be underwater basket weaving or Mongolian throat singing, Warbeard was simply the best. He was the authority, and no one could hold a candle even close to his magnanimous skill. You know, again, SquibblyD, I know we're barely halfway through this story. I can feel the fucking bile dripping off of this. I'm usually more, like, I know I'm interrupting right now. I usually do a little more. I don't think I need to. I feel your anger. And my God, it is a righteous one. So let's continue. This wouldn't be so bad if no one ever had to interact with him, but Warbeard, oh, he loved the games, especially competitive games about war. He loved them so much that he would drag his children into the gaming table with him to play against him. Let me give you a wonderful example of my favorite memories. This was my introduction to Dungeons & Dragons. Oh god, here we go. One day, Warbeard decided that he wanted to teach myself, my brother, and my twin sister about D&D. He came to us and asked if perhaps we might like to learn to play a game. And I honestly did, and so did my sister. We were much younger then, not even teenagers, and the idea of going on a fantasy adventure absolutely thrilled us. So when dear old Dad came at us and asked if we wanted to play, we were absolutely ecstatic. We'd just seen some second-rate movie about tabletop gaming by the same name at this point, so we were enamored with the idea of having an epic adventure of our own. However, knowing the nature of Warbeard gave us pause. I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, some way, what would be a humble D&D adventure would rapidly spiral into complete competitive pandemonium. Warbeard had this amazing tendency to make things that were fun, not fun. Rule bending, rules lawyering, arguing, yelling, throwing fits, this was all par the course. And so it was a safe bet that our father would somehow find a way to make the game an absolutely insufferable mess. He assured us that things would be fine, that he was the dungeon master, and that it wasn't his job as a DM to murder his players, but rather to design a world within which our party's characters could interact. Begrudgingly, one by one, his children were strong-armed into rolling up characters to play in what would perhaps be the shortest-lived tabletop campaign in all of history. It all began around the table when the family sat down to roll up their characters. One by one, he would ask what each of us wanted to play, and whenever we would mention what we wanted to build for our characters, he told us that that simply would not work for the party. I wasn't allowed to be an elf ranger, for example. No. I had to play a half-orc barbarian. If he had gone ahead and wrote some pre-con characters and handed them out, I think it would have been received better, but he vehemently insisted that the characters we wanted to play would suck for the absolutely totally awesome dungeon that he had lovingly prepared for us, and demanded, instead, that we play the archetypes that he wanted us to run. He even went so far as to name our characters and pick our abilities for us instead of letting us play the game for ourselves. Fine, Dad. I mean, D&D literally is just imagination. The entire point of a party is that whatever weird character you come up with has to learn to get along with their group. Like, what the fuck is this dude doing? This feels less like D&D and more like fucking chess. Holy shit, dude. So we made our level 1 characters, began our adventure with the opening of a dungeon. We had been contacted by some mysterious benefactor who had asked us to explore some ruins, find out if it was dangerous, discover the secrets it held, so on and so forth. Simple introductory stage was set. We were intrepid explorers, about to plumb the abyss and discover untold treasures. We were excited. We entered the dungeon, and in the first room, at the end of the crawl space, had a treasure chest. My brother declared that he was going to crawl to the end and get the chest. At which point my dad told him he had activated a pressure plate and dropped a gelatinous cube directly on top of him. It ate his armor, his daggers, my weapons, my mom's weapon, my little sister's shield, and almost my little brother before we managed to dispel the beast. That's encounter 1, huh? Wow. Warbeard smiled the whole time, and after combat rewarded us with an empty treasure chest. So now, already horribly injured and unarmed, after the first room of the dungeon, Warbeard was winning, just the way he liked it. What a dick. This drove me nuts, especially as I played more tabletop as I got older. If tabletop is the GM versus the players, and there's a clear-cut winner, then it'll always be the GM. They have the entire game at their disposal, whereas the players only have their abilities and items. It is an unfair fight, which there is no way to win. Still, for some reason, Warbeard missed the most basic of lessons and was positively glowing after almost TPKing his party right after the character creation. Yeah, dude, it's the same thing with making, like, some of you have been watching, like, on Wednesdays when I do retro games. It's the same thing when you're making, like, Doom maps. It's not about making a map that can kill the player in 2 seconds. There are maps that you could totally make that do that. That's not fun, though. That ruins the fun. If the game is too hard and unfair, there is no fun. The joy is in exploring and understanding and learning the mechanics. Yes, there are traps. Yes, there are monster closets. Yes, there's all kinds of shit. But the fact is you learn how to work around these things and become better. If the entire thing is the DM just straight up killing everybody instantly, there's no fun in that. No one's going to want to keep playing with you because you suck. Rather than letting your party rest and heal, Warbeard starts to goad us. What, you don't want to keep exploring the dungeon? You really gonna take a rest after one little fight? Bunch of cowards. I thought you said you wanted to play D&D. Oh my god, what a fucking tool. We eventually all said screw it, take us to the next encounter. We passed through a door into a room that was occupied by some sort of specter. Spectre spent the entire combat targeting me with fear. It had a DC of almost 20, so there was no way I would will save out of it. I spent the entire encounter running around like a chicken with my head cut off, while my dad goaded me, remarking that, "It's okay that you're an absolute coward, not everyone can be a hero, maybe one day you'll be brave like your brother." What a douche. Warbeard thought this single-handedly was the most hilarious turn of events. Eventually the ghost cornered me and kept fearing my character anyway, before triumphantly declaring that my character wet himself in the corner and was cowering in his own filth while everyone else fought the ghost. It took almost an hour for the rest of the family to kill it, the whole time which I sat there listening to my dad call me a coward. You ever want to find out what makes sure that, in your golden years you wind up in an old folks' home and their family doesn't visit you? That's a good way to start. That's a good way to start. Just saying. With the Spectre destroyed, the third encounter began. This one perhaps illustrates best just what my father happens to be like. We enter a room with a fire elemental, and combat once more begins. Now you think that a fire elemental would instantly spell certain doom for any level 1 party, and in all honesty, it should. However, Lady Luck had turned my dad out for this encounter. He kept rolling painfully low, and didn't land a single blow the entire combat, which was somewhat amusing. Dad swore up and down that this wasn't how this encounter was supposed to play out, and remarked that someone, cue a stink-eye cast in my direction, must have swapped out his dice for a weighted set. Now, this is interesting because I was, 11 years old and had never played D&D before. Yeah, where the fuck is an 11-year-old gonna get weighted dice for a D&D game? Like, what the fuck is this? Oh my god, what a douche. I never owned RPG dice before, let alone a weighted set that consistently rolled nat 1s. Somehow, however, despite all of this, I must have managed to replace my father's dice with a set of failure dice that I stealthily procured from the time our game started to the time this battle began with the dice that I just did not have. Eventually, he demanded my brother let him use his dice, and he kept rolling atrociously while we butchered the creature in front of us. At the end of the encounter, he even stopped rolling and just called out a number, and landed the first and only hit the creature dealt to us the whole game, admittedly directed at my character. This guy sounds like a fucking asshole. We were maybe 5 or 6 hours in, and we're all getting very tired at this point of playing D&D with dear old Dad. But he was a far cry from done with us yet. We still had not cleared the dungeon, and through the next door waited his big reveal. We entered a room with a swirling portal at the end of it, and from its yawning mouth poured what could be described as demonic monkeys with their skin flayed off of them. I still remember the stats: 5 HP, 10 AC, and a 10 plus to hit an attack that dealt 5d8 plus 5 damage against a level 1 party. Wow. It wasn't even just 1 or 2. It wasn't like 10 or 20. No, this encounter was an all-you-could-eat buffet. We were to kill as many of them as we could, and if we killed enough to satiate Warbeard's bloodlust, then he wouldn't attack that round. What the fuck, dude? I want you to understand just how broken this is when stacked up against a level 1 player character. Even at 10 AC, all it would take was one round of bad rolls for the character to not kill enough for Warbeard's liking and get mauled by a bunch of demon monkeys that dealt enough damage to lay out every last one of us in a single hit. On a long enough timeline, we were going to fail. It was simply inevitable, especially since they kept pouring through the portal no matter how many we killed. It was only a matter of time before we failed to meet the quota, and the one-shot kills began. Naturally, Warbeard targeted me first because that's my dad. He didn't even let me make death save or offer the party a chance to resuscitate or stabilize my character. No, auto-dead. Too bad, so sad. Warbeard sat across the table and peered over the GM screen with a huge grin on his face. He had thrown an unbeatable encounter on the table, and to nobody's surprise, he was now killing his players. Good job, you won again. I just really want to emphasize once more that not only is that this poor OP's father, but also that they were fucking 11 when this happened. Like, I would not be surprised if neither you nor any of your siblings ever wanted to play D&D or any light games ever again, because this is fucked. I was finally free and took the time to relax while I waited for the next character to die. The next one to go is my little brother, who started to tear up when he realized that he was out of the game. Dad told him to shut the hell up and stop being a giant pussy like his sister. Wow, what a real fucking classy dude. And to man up, because it was just a game. Fuck this dude, I swear to God. He couldn't perceive that the encounter he had designed and thrown directly at us was specifically hostile, being played specifically hostile, and was an unnecessary nightmare being precipitated on the heads of his own children. That, of course, would require a degree of self-introspection that Warbeard most certainly lacked. Next to go was my sister. When all 3 kids were dead, Mom's dice suddenly caught on fire. Nat 20s everywhere. Monsters piling up in mounds left and right. It wasn't good enough for Warbeard, however, because the children weren't cheering on their mother. He called us sore losers and bitched about how his kids couldn't man the fuck up and celebrate as their mom took on an endless wave of demons in an epic last stand. Nobody cared at that point, let alone made an effort to even pretend to care. We're all tired and sick of Warbeard's antics. At that point, we just wanted the game to end. However, Warbeard didn't like this disengagement and decided that since his kids were being sore losers and needed to learn how to not take it so hard, he resurrected our characters only for them to eventually get one shot again. What the fuck is wrong with this dude? Finally, he noticed that the table was not having any fun whatsoever and eventually decided to let Mom finish off the last one to bring the game to a close. As soon as he said this, he stood up from the table and said, thanks for playing with me. I'm not going to run for you guys again. None of you know how to play an RPG. Just all sullen whenever I try to have some fun. None of you are any fun. It makes me miss the good old days when people actually understood heroism and got excited for the games I ran. I used to have people lining up in my house joining games because they actually understood what makes a good dungeon. But you guys just suck. I'm going to remind you once more that he is saying this to literal children. Then in one final flourish, he swipes all of the books, dice, sheets onto the floor and storms out of the room, leaving it all for my mother to clean up. What a fucking child. That is just a taste of what's in store. I had to grow up in this man's household. Between the constant abuse hurled my way and the insistence that he can do no wrong, Warbeard was always domineering and never a joy, even around his own friends. There's another memory that sticks out in my mind. I must have been 7 or 8 at the time, and Warhammer tournament had just begun in town. So, to no one's surprise, Warbeard obviously liked Warhammer. One day at the LGS, he found himself involved in a tournament, playing his orc army against somebody's wood elves. Warbeard was losing. Them wood elves were kicking his ass because Warbeard, for some reason, decided to get into a shooting war with wood elves instead of, advancing his orcs onto their territory and chopping them up with their choppas. I was spectating. It would mark that, hey, Dad, maybe you should advance your army and, get in there. To which my dad would respond, you're young, you don't understand tactics yet. I have an easy way to win, but this rolling is in on my side today. I've been rolling below average since we got here. That was his favorite excuse, rolling below average. Eventually, mid-tournament, Warbeard has a fit. The dice had not been kind to him the entire game, allegedly, and so demands his opponent that his 3-year-old son gets to roll the dice for him. That poor helpless nerd just said sure because he wasn't in the mood to fight a temperamental pit bull of a man, and let my baby brother roll dice in place of my father. Everyone was also, admittedly, tired of listening to a grown man whine about how cruel the dice gods happened to be, and so said, fine, let the kid roll the dice for you. My little brother goes ahead, rolls the dice, turns up an average result, to which Warbeard exclaims that this was, in fact, proof that the dice hated him and that luck was not on his side. Oh, for God's sake. The game continues with my brother rolling dice, but even that can't save him from the fact that he's totally playing his army in absolutely the wrong way. See, Wood Elves are good at, staying away and shooting things, and so it was no surprise that Warbeard was getting absolutely decimated. Eventually, a light bulb must have flicked somewhere inside Warbeard's skull because he recognizes he's getting wrecked and decides that perhaps, maybe, it's time to make that fateful charge against the enemy lines. He decides that he's going to charge with a unit that contains his general, and since the units he was charging contained snipers, they got to take pot shots at the general during the charge, 10 times. Warbeard's general died before he could even get into close combat. Wow. Some spectators scoff, remarking that it was a cheap move, perhaps to placate the percolating ire of the maddened man-child, and admittedly failing quite miserably. Warbeard was furious. Instead of picking up the model of his general and placing it back into the foam carrying case as an adult would, he seized his hands and chucked it across the room, narrowly missing some of the people currently playing in the tournament. As the figurine clattered to the ground like so many casualties of war, silence overcame the sprawling battlefield of nerds. The place fell silent as Warbeard returned his vicious gaze against the Wood Elf player and sullenly demands to know, "So is that enough to cause a panic test for my orcs, or they still make that charge?" Somehow he was not thrown out. I am surprised by this, honestly. I don't think anybody wanted to further provoke his ire and see just how off the handle Warbeard could fly. No, he was allowed to stay and continue the tournament, without so much as anyone approaching him to reprimand him for his childlike behavior. His opponent, too, tucked tail and allowed Warbeard's orcs to charge. A blatant lie. Even after his temperamental tantrums and bullying other players at the Warhammer tournament, he still lost every single one of his lineups and failed to place. After the tournament, he made his rounds trying to talk with the other nerds, but many of them, upset by his behavior, said that they had somewhere else to be and they couldn't talk or catch up. Warbeard did take it personally, and eventually said screw it, loaded us all into the car. It was a miracle we drove home that night, that he didn't crash the car in a fit of rage. I found out after the fact that the game shop did in fact continue to host Warhammer tournaments. However, rather than publicly posting the information for the games, they were organized by word of mouth in an express effort to keep Warbeard from attending. You know, it's bad when even the nerds don't want anything to do with you. These are just a couple of stories about Dear Old Dad. If you guys like them, I'll make a point to dig up some of the more choice bits and post them here for your amusement. Take it easy. Wow, dude. I mean, just fucking wow. I can't imagine growing up with somebody that fucking narcissistic and insane. Like, seriously, that is fucking crazy. Like, it definitely sounds like he never got over being discharged, like OP said. Like, he got thrown out of the army, or whatever branch of military he was in, and he just never got over it. And this weird obsession with being the best and proving how much of a big, manly, strong man he is by winning every single game is just fucking insane. The Warhammer game is bad, but honestly the D&D game is the one that sticks with me the most. That's the most fucked up. Because it's like, dude, it's not just that you're playing against other people and, oh, you're kind of a dick to other players, whatever. These are your literal kids. Your actual children, and you're doing this. Like, what the fuck, bro? You're an adult. Calm the fuck down. This weird way he did D&D also really rubs me the wrong way, because it's like, literally my introduction to it was with several friends, and the idea was pure creativity. If you can build something and make it work, then honestly, you should be allowed to do it. It created a bunch of very strange characters for us, and we kind of did everything we could to make a party work. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the fact that we could just be that creative. This dude seems to somehow taking D&D, a game that's based purely on the idea of minimalistic rules and a lot of creativity, and suck all the creativity out of it. I don't even know how the fuck you do that. That would be amazing if it wasn't such a fucking bullshit thing to do. So, yeah, Squibbly D, I am so sorry that you had to go through all that. That is extra fucked. This dude sounds like an asshole, and I am sorry that you had to grow up dealing with all that shit. It's fucked, dude. It's really fucked. I hope you're okay, bro. That's oh my god. Honestly, the fact that you're still playing tabletop stuff or got back into it surprises me. Again, like I said earlier, I would not be surprised if neither you or any of your siblings ever wanted to play tabletop games again. And I wouldn't blame you. If that was your introduction, holy shit, dude, that's fucked. I wouldn't want to play either. That is really fucked up. Jesus, man. So, that's the end of this story. I look forward to, if you make more parts, I'll definitely check them out. And as for the rest of you, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. I got a Ko-Fi and a merch store. I'd appreciate you checking them out. If you'd like to send me your story directly, r/Moonhorse Stories. I check it every day, so I will see it. And every Saturday and Wednesday, there are live streams. Wednesday is a bunch of gaming stuff that we're working on, and Saturday is just general internet cringe. Whichever you want to check out, or both of them. I'd prefer both, but it's really up to you. All these things can be found on my channel. So I love you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye, everybody.